Good Wednesday afternoon to you. Hope you're having a great day. Thanks for joining us on Sports4CLE. Plenty to talk about today. A little later in the show, Anthony Castrovince from MLB.com will join us. We'll talk Guardians baseball and the signing of the big extension by Jose Ramirez. Also dive into the AL Central. A little later in the show, Eddie McDonald from Dog Pound Daily will join us. We'll talk some Browns football. That is where we begin. And let's welcome in Scott Petrak, Browns beat reporter from the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram. And Scott, let's get right to it. I know you've answered this question as a beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram. You can also read them on brownzone.com. Do you think the Browns are looking at potentially trading Denzel Ward?
I don't think so. I don't know why they would, Dave. You know, he's a number one cornerback in the. You know, he's a top number one guy in the league. He's a Pro Bowler a year ago. I know he's due for a big contract, right? And that's coming up after the 2022 season. But, you know, he's a hometown kid. He wants to be here. I think he's proven that he's a big-time player. I just don't see the reason you would want to deal a guy like that.
The other thing is you view it as a position of strength. You have Greg Newsome. But that is a position that needs to be strong because of the modern NFL throwing the football all over the place, 3-4 wides. You better have a couple of corners that can cover. And right now, Newsome and Ward are pretty darn good.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. You need a lot of depth, too, right? So with Ward, Newsome, Greedy Williams, and Troy Hill, you go, okay, we like this foursome. You know, and you have A.J. Green as a fifth guy if you need him. But if you take Denzel Ward away, all of a sudden, is Greg Newsome a legit number one? I mean, that's a question you have to answer. Greedy Williams, you know, has had plenty of injury history, right? We know about the shoulder, which he tried to play through last year, but it did crop up. And he's entering the last year of his contract. And then there's not a whole lot of depth there. So, you know, I can understand why Denzel Ward was brought up in possible Deshaun Watson trade scenarios, right? Because you're trying to get a quarterback back, a quarterback you think makes you a Super Bowl contender. But unless it's for a quarterback, I just don't see why you would trade Denzel Ward unless you thought you're not going to sign him to a big-time extension. But I've not gotten that indication from the organization.
And along those lines, it's important to note, salary cap's going to continue going up in the NFL. Revenue streams are coming in, and there will be an increase in the salary cap each and every year. All right, this is kind of interesting. This is the 2021 snap weighted age. So it's from Football Outsiders. Browns are the second youngest team in the NFL with a 25.7 snap-weighted adjusted age. They are the youngest at defensive back. So you look at Cleveland there on the bottom. DBs, 24.5 is the average age. And in addition to being young, we've talked about it, Scott, they're good. I mean, so young and good is a great combination to have, especially at a place like defensive back.
Yeah, and you mentioned it before, Dave. It's such a premium position, especially in today's NFL, right? You talk about quarterback, you talk about pass rusher, you talk about corner, and you talk about left tackle and then receiver, right? I mean, it's one of those five, and you can make an argument that it's the second most important behind quarterback. So that's why I think you need to hang on to a guy like Denzel Ward. That's why I think it's incredibly important, that stat that you just showed. That's really encouraging when you think about the long-term future of this team, especially of the secondary. And that's surprising because it feels like, you know, the team has gotten a little older and there's some maturity on this team. And Myles Garrett's been here a while. But the fact is, Denzel Ward's still really young. David Njoku's still really young. And you kind of go through the roster and there's a lot of guys like that even if they played a decent amount of seasons, they're still 25, 26.
And that is the reason that Andrew Berry in the front office have those age guardrails on rookies, because by the time you get to the second contract, they're still young and they haven't been kind of beat up with a lot of mileage on them. That's kind of the philosophy this front office appears to have.
Yeah, and, you know, they said it, and I think Paul DePodesta said it at the owners' meetings last week, that it's not the end-all, be-all, right? Because Cooper Kupp was an older guy when he came into the league. But it is a factor, and it is something the organization looks at. And not only do you not have a lot of mileage on you, but when you get eligible for that second contract, you know, you're not 27 or 28, you're 25 or 26. And then I think it makes more sense for the team to say, okay, well, we can commit to another 3 or 4 years. The guy's not even going to be 30 yet. And that's a different discussion when you talk about crossing into 29, 30, 31 organizationally. So I think that's we talk a lot about analytics. I think that, not that it takes a math genius to figure out how old somebody is, but I do think that's one of the data points that this organization has looked at, maybe more than some other organizations.
All right, let's change focus just a little bit. Again, I know you've dealt with this via the mailbag, and you've answered this question in your beat writing duties. Are you concerned that Deshaun Watson hasn't played football and it'll probably be a year and a half by the time they eventually get him onto the field, in theory?
Yeah, you know what? I think it's something to pay attention to for sure. I don't think it's going to be the demise of the Browns season or him. But I do think it is something to pay attention to, just like you would if a guy missed the entire season with an injury. Now, obviously, he didn't have the injury, so that's something you don't have to take into account. But it's been a long time since he's, read a defense at full game speed. And that's not going to come until we don't know when, right? Is it week 1 or is it week 5 or 7 or 9, depending on, if the NFL suspends him. So I think that is something to keep an eye on. And I would think there'll be, some growing pains or some speed bumps when he does take that first game action. Now, I'm not saying that means the Browns lose that first game. I think he'll get over that relatively quickly. But, we talk so much about reps, and coaches talk about it and players talk about it. We don't have any game reps for a whole year. So I think that is something that you just can't ignore. But I do think the fact that the suspension would not affect his preseason or training camp. So he should get most of, if not all, the offseason program and your OTAs and mini camps and then training camp and then the preseason, that should help to some degree shake off that rust.
Yeah, and the positive side of it is his body has one less year of getting beat on by defenses because he didn't play last year. So there is a give and take. One of the guys that is connected with the Browns potentially via trade, Brandon Cooks. So Mike Florio, Chris Sims talked about the fit and also the trade history of Brandon Cooks. This is from NBC Sports Pro Football Talk.
He was a first rounder of the Saints, traded to the Patriots for the first rounder plus, traded to the Rams for a first rounder plus, and then traded in 2020 to the Texans for that second rounder. He's available, and again, it's the same reason that the Seahawks should be thinking about getting rid of DK Metcalf. We don't have the quarterback to get him the ball consistently. Let's flip this now. Let's get assets now. Let's help rebuild for the future now. And you have a team like the Browns out there who've already picked up Amari Cooper. You add Brandon Cooks to a mix that has Deshaun Watson at quarterback eventually. You got a pretty potent receiving core and passing game.
Definitely.
In Cleveland.
Ready to go. Like a group that's ready to go right off the bat. You had that with Donovan People-Jones and Schwartz, like we've talked about before, David Njoku, those two running backs. That would be a pretty damn good, tried and proven unit right there.
So, Scott, I guess the question is, what do you think it would take to acquire Cooks? And would you be willing to do it if it was, say, a third? They say a second. If it was a third, would you be willing to do it?
Yeah, I think so. You have to start weighing the money that you're going to have to pay him. And you're already committed $20 million to Amari Cooper and, what you're paying Deshaun Watson. And we go through the rest of the roster. I'm intrigued by that. Reports out of Houston are that they don't want to trade Brandon Cooks and they want to keep him around. Who knows what you can believe at this time of year. It doesn't seem like there's a lot going on in those trade talks right now, but it could change around the draft. You never know. He's certainly a guy that I'd be interested in, but you have to weigh what you have to give up and then what you have to pay, right? I mean, the Browns have gotten in that kind of salary cap range where you do have to think about, okay, what are we paying this guy? How long can we pay him? But obviously the Browns need help at receiver. The question is, do you commit resources through draft picks and or big salary cap or big salary versus just sitting at 44 and taking what would be, you would think, a good young receiver that you can get much cheaper?
Fair enough. The other thing to keep in mind is the Texans, they're going to say we want to hang on to him. With a rookie quarterback, Davis Mills, and probably looking to get a franchise quarterback through the draft in the upcoming years, doesn't make sense to have an elite receiver if you can get some capital that you can use in the future for him.
No, I agree with that. You never know. You never know how far a team is willing to take a team to the studs, right? Or do they hang on to some guys and you say, okay, this guy can be with us 3 years from now? But yeah, I mean, there's a good chance that, or there is at least a chance that he will be available. And then you weigh him, if you're the Browns, you weigh him versus other guys, and you wonder if there's going to be a huge trade market and you can't keep up because the Browns are low in draft picks over the next few years because of the Deshaun Watson trade.
All right, Scott Petrak and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out, other side of the break. We head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. We're talking trade, a couple of trade ideas from viewers when we return on Sports4CLE. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a line. A long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just a mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students, kindergarten through 12th grade, can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. We continue talking Browns with Scott Petrak from the Elyria Chronicle Telegram. Can also read them on brownzone.com on the internet. All right, let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. This one about acquiring a wide receiver.
I'm just wondering if Kareem Hunt's trade value worth very much towards a wide receiver, maybe even if they include Baker Mayfield. Wait, just a thought. Thanks.
All right. As always, we appreciate all of the voicemails. And Scott, I don't think Kareem Hunt is a guy they would trade to acquire a wide receiver. He's a threat in the passing game to begin with. By and large, the value of running backs it's not as high as you would like it to be.
Yeah, Dave, you said it right there. Number one, I do think Kareem is a big asset in the passing game. So, maybe you get a better true receiver, but are you really having a big impact in your overall passing game? We saw how much he missed Kareem Hunt a year ago when he was in. Then the second part of that is receivers are valued much more highly than running backs these days. So I don't think you get kind of fair value in a Kareem Hunt trade. And the final point would be, I'm not saying he's untouchable because you do have Nick Chubb and you do have Dearness Johnson, assuming he comes back on that restricted free agent tag. But he's a good player, and the Browns are trying to win now. So I find it hard to believe that they're going to go out of their way to try to trade some of their better players because they can use those players. Now, if a team came and said, hey, we'll give you this and this for Kareem Hunt, that's one thing. But I got a hard time thinking the Browns are shopping Kareem Hunt.
Yeah, I'm with you. All right. This was a trade that was proposed by one of our callers earlier in the week. Baker Mayfield for Tyler Lockett. Now, let's follow the money on this as well. SpotTrack shows us the money situation due for Lockett, and you see his average salary, $17.25. So the money matches up pretty well, as you would like it. So 2022, it's a little over 10. So basically, the cap hit would be a little over 10. You see $16 million. If you're trading Mayfield for Lockett, the salary increase and the salary bump for the Seahawks would be minimal. They do have Drew Lock, and they do have DK Metcalf. So you'd be bringing in a potential franchise quarterback. They could use their high draft pick on one of the upcoming wide receivers. it makes some sense if you follow kind of that line of thinking. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I like Tyler Lockett as an option a lot. He's been really productive there. We've seen him be a big-time deep threat with Russell Wilson, and you think he would fit well with Deshaun Watson and Amari Cooper. The question about that trade to me is if the Seahawks really like Baker Mayfield and they really believe he can be a potential quarterback of their future. Because if not, then they're not going to give up a quality asset like Lockett. They're not going to take Mayfield on for just 1 year at the salary he's going to make in 2022, nearly $19 million. So it's all about how the Seahawks feel about Baker. And, and maybe they love him. And, we've all heard the rumors and, the connection there, and I get it. But if I'm Seattle, I think I'd rather take a flyer on Baker than trade a big-time asset like Lockett for Baker, right? You can get Baker without trading Tyler Lockett. I mean, I don't think there's any question about that if you're the Seahawks, right? If you take on all Baker's salary, you can make that trade. So I like it from a Browns perspective a bunch. I don't know if I buy it from a Seahawks perspective.
Fair enough. The only way that it would make sense is if they're concerned about the $18 million hit. And there is a more cap-friendly way of getting if they view Mayfield as a long-term solution. Very fair point. All right, again, this one from your mailbag. Is there any way the Browns keep Baker Mayfield on the 53-man roster?
Yeah, I just don't see it. I know Andrew Berry left the door open at the owners' meetings. We got 3 really good quarterbacks. It's a position that's so valuable, and some teams are looking for their first guy. And I understand why he would say that, but I just can't see it. I think the Browns made up their mind that they were moving on from Baker, and I know that Baker made up his mind that he's moving on from the Browns. So I think something would have to change drastically, and I don't see really any reason why it would, unless the Browns try to dig in their heels because they got no trade offers whatsoever. But I think come the draft, they'll be able to move Baker. Now, they might have to eat some of the salary. They might have to throw in a draft pick, whatever it is. But I just don't think it's a workable solution anymore.
So you think something happens around the draft with him is kind of the magic time for it?
I think so. You have the draft, and then you have, does somebody get hurt after that? And that just is too uncertain, right? You're waiting for something else to happen. You hang on to him. He's not showing up at minicamp. And it's just a lot to deal with that you don't have to, right? If you can just make a trade. Now, I know the Browns don't have a lot of leverage right now, so it makes it more difficult to trade or to get what you want back in a trade. But that feels like the tipping point right now is right around the draft.
All right, so before we go to break, if you had the ability to sign, we're going to look at wide receivers again. If you had the ability to sign either Jarvis Landry or Will Fuller, you can only sign one. Which one do you choose and why?
Yeah, I think that's a tough one. I'd go with Jarvis Landry because, to me, he's more of a known commodity. He's been here for, 4 years. He's really respected inside the organization. We know all about Jarvis. Hadn't missed a game for injury until last year. And I know he's getting older, so you don't know if that trend's going to continue, but I like that history of not missing games. Will Fuller has missed games. I know he's a different type of receiver. He's faster. He's got a little bit of history with Deshaun Watson. He's a deep threat when Jarvis is more of a, possession guy. But I just like what I feel is certainty with Jarvis Landry. And I kind of like the idea of him finishing what he started with this turnaround that he certainly was a big part of, especially culturally within the organization. So I'd go Jarvis.
Yeah, the other thing is Will Fuller's been kind of banged up throughout his career, so that's kind of dovetails in with what you were saying about Jarvis. Scott Petrak and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, we head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Caller wants to know about a potential draft day deal. That's straight ahead on Sports4CLE. Stay with us.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just the mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
Thanks for buying a fishing license. I want you to picture all the great things this simple purchase does. Like building public boat ramps, keeping local waters clean, and maintaining a healthy fish population.
What's Mom doing?
When you buy a fishing license, you do a lot. Every dollar protects and maintains your local waterways for future generations to enjoy. Visit takemefishing.org.
We continue talking Browns with Scott Petrak, Browns beat reporter from the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram, as well as brownzone.com. Time to head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason with a possible draft day trade scenario.
Hi, I'm a long-time Browns fan, and I was kind of bummed when we traded away our first-round pick for Deshaun Watson. I'm obviously happy that we got Deshaun Watson, but I was wondering, do you think there's maybe a possibility that we trade back into the late first round and get someone like Jameson Williams or Chris Olave? All right, bye.
As always, we appreciate all of the voicemails. Scott, what do you think? Is it realistic to get back into the first round?
I don't. I mean, those are two names that would be certainly intriguing and might light a fire under Andrew Bayer to try to do it. I just think it's going to be impossible without having first-round picks in the next two drafts. I mean, that's usually how you move back into the first round is by giving up a first rounder moving forward. So you'd probably have to give up a big-time player to do that. I mean, like we talked about, is that what you want to do? Because then you just create another need if you traded a guy like Denzel Ward. So I think it's going to be hard to get back in the first round. I understand why fans would want the Browns to try that, but I think you're going to have to come to grips with sitting at number 44 and being happy with whoever falls to that spot.
Having said that, I think if there's somebody that falls and is sliding, it would probably have to be within 5 or 6 spots of 44. They may flip that compensatory third to move up some. That would be the only thing I could see them potentially doing.
No, you're right. I mean, that's the scenario, right? I can't envision, unless the perfect player fell or whatever, but I can't envision Paul DePodesta and Andrew Berry continuing to give away future draft picks. In fact, I think when they come out of the draft, one of the goals is to add draft picks in 2023 and 2024 because they're already going to be down because of the Deshaun Watson trade. So, I can't see moving up, and in order to move up, you give up the number 2 next year. I just don't see that being a realistic option. So yours is a scenario, but that kind of limits you how far you can move up.
Yeah, and again, they probably are looking at those third-round picks with guys that they need to plug in certain things, and we'll get to the needs in a minute that they need to address. So Albert Breer has tweeted this out within the past few minutes. Browns are hosting Treylon Burks and Christian Watson on visits Friday. So kind of interesting. Watson, a guy that could be in play in day 2. Maybe they're looking at Burks as somebody that potentially falls into that early second round based on what he did at the Combine, because he didn't run as fast as some people thought he would. But those are interesting moves to host those guys.
Yeah, it is. You got to consider so many things when you talk about these official 30 visits. First of all, I watched Burks's workout at the Combine from inside Lucas Oil Stadium. He looked really good to me. I know his 40 time wasn't, out of this world, but I'm not sure anybody expected him to run a great 40 time. It looked smooth to me. I thought he was easy catching the ball. There's a lot to like about him, and I don't think there's any way he's at 40 or below. Watson could be. It feels like he's going to go higher than that too, but you never know if he falls. He's certainly in that mix for the Browns at 44. But, I've talked to enough GMs in the past that, they use these visits to kind of get information on guys when it comes to free agency 4 or 5 years from now. They like to have a guy in their building. They like to sit down with them, feel like you really get to know a guy. And, especially if you don't have a first-round pick, it's such a crapshoot who's going to be around in the second or third round. Are there really 30 guys that the Browns want to invest enough time in the second and third rounds that they're going to have in? Probably not. So I think they'll use some of those extra picks on guys to kind of lay the groundwork moving forward, guys that they already know they like. And I think that's probably where Burks falls into it.
Fair enough. All right, so let's take a look. This is a 7-round mock draft by Josh Edwards, CBSSports.com, for the Browns. At 44, they have Travis Jones, defensive tackle from the University of Connecticut. Strong hands, gets off blocks, plays down the line, sacrifices a little bit of neutral ground in space. What do you think as far as the way Travis Jones fits? He's been connected to the Browns at 44 in a couple of different mock drafts.
Yeah, I like that idea. Obviously, they need a defensive tackle as of right now. I actually, within the last hour and a half, talked to his coach at UConn because I'm going to write a story about him leading up to the draft. So I'm intrigued by him. The coach raved. Lou Spanos is his name. He's a longtime coach, was in the NFL, the Steelers for a while. He was defensive coordinator at UConn, but was interim head coach last year, and just raves about Travis Jones as a player, as a person. Thinks he can be, the run stopper. He said linebackers will love having this guy in front of him. Thinks he also can push the pocket, is a pass rusher a little bit, which you'd want. He wouldn't be on the field on third downs, but you want that ability on first and second down and not just be a sit there plug guy. So I think he's really intriguing. And depending on how the Browns address the receiver position between now and the draft, right, whether it's a trade or Jarvis Landry or they stand pat, defensive tackle could move up that list of priorities.
And again, we'll get into what you think they need to do as far as areas of positional need next segment. Third round in this mock draft, another name that's kind of familiar, John Mechie, wide receiver from Alabama. And that's a guy, if he'd have come out last year, he might have been even a little bit higher. He did have the injury, and that's probably why I went back. But could be the most talented wide receiver available at that position in the third round. What do you think of Mechie?
Yeah, I like him a lot. And he's coming off an ACL as well, just like Jamison Williams. I did a bunch of research on him yesterday because I'm hoping to talk to Nick Saban soon. I usually get Nick once a year before the draft, and Mechie was a guy I was really focused on. So I did a lot of research. A really interesting backstory. I think he was born in Taiwan and then lived in Africa for a while, then moved to Canada, and then went away to prep school in America because he thought he could be a big-time football player. Luck, isn't afraid to block, has good run after catch. There's just a lot to like. I'm not sure he gets to 78. I think he's a guy that you might have to consider at 44. That might be a little high, but if you really like him, might not get to 78, or you move up from 78 somehow to, if you really were interested in him. But he's certainly an intriguing prospect.
Yeah, and remember, those Alabama wide receivers have done pretty well in the NFL, so I'm sure that that's another thing that adds to that. All right, the compensatory third, they had Josh Paschal, edge rusher from Kentucky. Then in the fourth, they have the Browns going Cade Otton, tight end from Washington. So it would give them an option behind Bryant and Njoku. Well-balanced tight end that they feel fits the Browns scheme nicely. What do you think about Otton with the Browns?
Yeah, it's interesting, the position, right? Because like it says right there, it talks about Njoku and Austin Hooper. And I'm not sure how the Browns are going to deal with tight end moving forward. We saw them use so much 3 tight end personnel packages a year ago. And, if they went out and drafted a guy relatively high, then you say, okay, they're probably going to do it again with Njoku and whoever they draft and Harrison Bryant. But I'm not convinced they will. When we talked about this, I think they might go to more 3 receiver sets, maybe more 2 running backs with Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, or you can even throw Dearness Johnson in the mix if you wanted to. So I think if they drafted a tight end real high or relatively high, and that would be, I think it would signal the offense, at least from a personnel package standpoint, isn't going to change as much as it possibly could.
The last player they had him drafting is E.J. Perry, quarterback from Brown. Not talking about him. Do you think they draft a developmental quarterback? That's something that they really haven't done yet.
No, they haven't. And I would say the time's probably right. You know, no matter what they did as a starter, if it was Baker or if it was Deshaun Watson, they probably need to do that. Yeah, and I think, you know, it's going to be Andrew Berry's third draft. It would probably be a surprise if he didn't. Plus, because there's no succession plan needed for Deshaun Watson, but you need a succession plan at backup, right? Because you got Jacoby Brissett. It's a one-year deal. Maybe he sticks around longer. Maybe he doesn't. But it'd be nice to kind of have a young guy that you said, okay, he's been here for a bit. If he needs to play, we trust this guy as a backup, and there's just nobody kind of in the system.
Scott Petrick and I are going to step aside, take one more time out. Other side of the break, we will go back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason with one of the Browns' new acquisitions this voicemailer wants to know about. Sports for CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a line. A long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just a mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students, kindergarten through 12th grade, can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. We continue talking Browns with Scott Petrick, Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle Telegram as well as brownzone.com. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. This one about one of the Browns' new acquisitions.
Hey, Dave, lifetime Browns fan here. Love your show. And y'all have been talking about different position groups, which is great. I want to ask about the defensive line. Obviously, we've got superstar Myles Garrett, and then there's a big drop-off and a lot of question marks. But the Browns did acquire Chase Winovich. So didn't follow him with New England, but I do remember watching him play at Michigan. What do the Browns have in Winovich? Is he a potential starter if they're not able to get Clowney back on the roster? Is he basically replacing Takk McKinley and they want to come back with Clowney and Winovich? Where do you see him fitting, and how much of an impact might the Browns defense get from adding him? Thanks, appreciate you.
All right, as always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Scott, I will defer to you as the Browns beat reporter. What do they have in Winovich?
I think the caller is right on the money when he talked about replacing Takk McKinley. I think Winovich is a third end, you know, and we've seen the defensive ends, when you get to third down, they slide inside, whether it was Myles Garrett or Jadeveon Clowney, whoever it is. Winovich played a lot of outside linebacker with the Patriots in the 3-4 system. So now he's transitioning to 4-3 end, which means he's a little lighter. I don't know if you want him trying to set the edge down in and down out on first and second down. I see him as a situational pass rusher with some upside, right? He had some pretty impressive sack numbers in limited time with the Patriots his first couple of years, and it didn't play much at all in 2021. So I do think there's some upside there, but he won't solve that number 2 end void in my eyes.
Yeah, and I think that was a really underrated part of what Jadeveon Clowney did. He really was good against the run, and it's not sexy, and it's not something you really have to be looking to see what he does well against the run, being Clowney.
Yeah, and I think Olivier Vernon kind of set that tone when he was here the previous couple of years. He was good at that, and you look, the sack numbers are just kind of average. But it's important, especially for the guy opposite Myles Garrett. They're probably going to run to your side. You have to be able to do that, and I think Vernon and Clowney show the ability to do that.
All right, so let me ask you this: what do you think is the top as the roster sits right now? Top priority. I'll give you a 1 and a 1A in this. What do you think the top priority is?
Yeah, I would go 1 is the number 2 end. I just think that's such a position that you need to find somebody, whether it's Clowney or somebody else, or you wait to the draft. That would be the spot for me. In 1A, I'm going to go D tackle. I know they have some bodies there with Trevin Bryan that they signed in free agency, and Jordan Elliott, and Tommy Togiai, who didn't really play much as a rookie. But they need somebody in the middle. They need kind of like a difference maker. And we talked about Travis Jones. Maybe you get a difference maker at number 44 if you don't do it first in free agency. So I would go all D-line. I know we've talked about a bunch. We talked a bunch about receiver, and I get that. And that's important, and they're not done there. But I put defensive line higher on my to-do list.
Yeah, when you put it that way, we've said forever, football's won on the lines, both offensive and defensive, and the Browns do need to address the defensive line. I think part of us is skewed because the passing game was so challenged last year. You feel like you got to fix it. Cooper and Watson are going to make that more dynamic than it's been.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. You look at, if you didn't have Amari Cooper, then yeah, obviously receiver would be at the top of the list. But, you can picture a receiving core with Cooper and Peoples-Jones and Schwartz and Jakeem Grant and, maybe whatever, Demetric Felton or Jamarcus Bradley. Like, you can see that and go, okay, it's not ideal, but with Watson and with Njoku and with Chubb and Hunt, you could make it work, right? Not obviously, I still think they're going to upgrade that position, but I can envision that. I got a hard time envisioning a D-line with Myles Garrett and Trevin Bryan and Jordan Elliott and Chase Winovich, right? Like, that doesn't work for me when you're talking about trying to get to a Super Bowl.
All right, real quick before I let you go, do the moves the Browns are making tell you they are in win-now mode?
Yes. I would say yes, but I think it's all about the future too, right? Deshaun Watson isn't about just 2022 because of the chance he's suspended, and that's Andrew Berry talked about getting the 5th year on the contract was really important. So I think the moves are for now and the future, but I do think now. I think they plan to win now, and I think they did a year ago, and that's what was so frustrating that they didn't win in 2021, and they were not going to let themselves go into 2022 without a quarterback that they felt they could win with. So, yeah, I think they expect to be in the playoffs this year.
Scott Petrak, Browns beat reporter as always. Scott, thanks so much for the time and the insight. Appreciate it very much.
Thanks, Dave.
All right, Scott Petrak, you can read him, brownszone.com on the internet. He's also the Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle Telegram. Eddie McDonald from Dog Pound Daily, straight ahead, talking more Browns. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students, kindergarten through 12th grade, can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
I am powerful beyond my wildest imagination.
I will define my future.
I will keep challenging myself to improve.
Because I am a future leader of this great nation.
I will be responsible for raising a beautiful family
and educating not only my generation, but many more to come.
I will make a difference in my community.
And I will stand up for what I believe in.
I will not settle for simply chasing my dreams. I will achieve them.
Because I was given a chance.
An opportunity.
A home.
At Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America.
The ultimate leadership experience.
FCCLA has been one of the greatest experiences of my life.
It's made me who I am today.
Join us. We'll build a new future together.
We continue talking Browns. Let's welcome in Eddie McDonald from Dog Pound Daily. Eddie, end of last segment, we were talking about Browns in win now mode. You wrote an article, 3 reasons that you think the Browns are in win now mode. Take us through it.
Yeah, so the first thing, Barry and Stefanski, they're assembling their own roster now. You'll see some players that were in there before them. They obviously inherited the roster when they came in 2020. They inherited some players. One of those players, Mac Wilson, is already out the door, and Chase Winovich is in. That was a trade. Mac Wilson wasn't one of their guys, and he busted his butt, and he was what he was. He didn't live up to expectations, and he battled injuries. He played a lot better in 2021, but he's a guy that, he's off the roster now. They're getting their own roster. But they're getting the guys they want. I know Barry was here, and he was involved in some drafts when he was here with the Browns the first time, but he was only the head of player personnel. He wasn't, the president of football operations or the general manager. Stefanski has a system, obviously, he wants to run, and they're in sync. So that's number one. Number two, you have the primes of different players' careers. You have Myles Garrett, first and foremost, who is the best player on the Browns, offensively or defensively. I guess you can put Deshaun Watson, but they got Deshaun Watson. They wanted a franchise quarterback. They didn't think Baker was it. They got him. But you have guys like a Myles Garrett, a Nick Chubb, who is under contract for the next 3 seasons, Denzel Ward, who his status is up in the air, and I actually have something coming out on Dog Pound Daily tomorrow about Denzel Ward and why the Browns should not trade him, but that's another discussion for another day. They have a bunch of young guys that, Newsome and JOK last year were rookies. They had the pieces in place. And finally, it's Deshaun Watson of why they're in win now mode. And as you guys just talked about in the previous segment, it's not necessarily for 2022 because of the pending suspension. If he gets one, how long that will be, we still have no idea. But if it's 4 to 6 games, 8 games, whatever, that's manageable. If it's 2022, the whole season, obviously, that's a different discussion. But he is a difference maker, and if he is on the field and his legal troubles are shored up and away, no matter if that's suspension with it or not, it's not just for 2022, but for the future. But that's win now, and their window is wide open with this roster.
Yeah, that's the amazing part of it. It's young and it's talented, being the Browns roster. All right, another thing that you wrote about. What do the Browns need from Jacoby Brissett? Again, you wrote an article on Dog Pound Daily. What do they need from him in 2022?
Okay, so in this article, which came out this morning, I believe, I talked about it, how Jacoby Brissett wasn't signed to be, a world blazer. He's not there to be the starter. They obviously have Deshaun Watson for that. So what they signed him for is A, to back him up, and B, to be a backup in case he is Watson, that is suspended for, any amount of games, 4, 6, 8, 10, even more. No matter what the amount of games is, all the Browns need from Jacoby Brissett is to play solid football. He doesn't have to go out and, throw 20 touchdowns and 2 interceptions in the however many starts he has. He just has to play sound football and not turn the ball over. And a lot of people are like, oh, well, good luck with Brissett. Well, he has started in the NFL. He hasn't had the greatest career, but he hasn't had a terrible career. He's been a backup a lot of his career, but the times he has to start, he has performed well. Not great, but with this roster around him, he doesn't have to do that. They can, feed Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt, even Dearness Johnson. He has to make throws, and he can't turn it over. So with them, he just has to come in and win games. So if Watson's suspended, it doesn't matter if it's 4 games, 6 games, 8 games, anything other than that, he has to put the Browns in position to win at least half of those. So, if, he can go 2-2 if it's a 4-game suspension, 3-3 or better, 4-4 or better. You're still in the thick of things, I would assume, for not just the division, but the AFC as well, because the AFC is loaded. Then the division is also loaded with the Bengals. The Ravens are going to be a problem this year because they're going to be healthy. The Steelers, they're going to be pretty good, I think. I don't think they're going to be as good as some people think, but that's just the AFC North in a nutshell.
Yeah, and the other thing is, and we've talked about this before, Watson and Brissett can run the same offense. It's not like Watson is more elite, but Brissett can get done what they want to do in an offense that Deshaun Watson normally runs.
Sure, and Watson makes plays on his feet a lot, just as much as he does with his arm. And Brissett does the same thing. Last year he had 5 starts in place of Tua Tagovailoa in Miami. And quarterback stats aren't a win, but the Dolphins went 3-2 under Brissett. He threw 5 touchdowns and 4 interceptions, but he also ran for 4 touchdowns and 200 and something yards. So if you can get that from him, he doesn't have to rush for 75, 80 yards a game. If you can get 30, 40 rush yards from him, maybe a touchdown, or put them in position to hand the ball off to Chubb, or get one of the tight ends involved, then that's all they have to do. And he's, like I say, he's not coming here to set the world on fire. He's not coming here to compete for a starting spot. He knows that. He knows what his role is, I'm pretty sure, and that's just what they need him to do, just play his role.
All right, so let's take a look. This is, according to ESPN, 2022 draft, team needs and prospect fits. So wide receiver, interior, and edge line, linebacker, interior offensive line. After losing Landry, Beckham, and Higgins over the past years, looking for depth at wide receiver, could add some skill positions in the draft. Many options at defensive tackle on day 2. Let's focus on that. Winfrey, Leal, Travis Jones, 3 names that could be targeted by the Browns. Who do you like out of that group of 3?
You can't really go wrong with either of them, but I've been big on Travis Jones this offseason. I wrote an article about him a month or 2 ago and got some more research on him and, got to see what he's about. I really like him there. Like I said, obviously you can't go wrong with the other 2, but I believe unless like Treylon Burks somehow falls to 44, I know he's is injured and they're having him in for a workout this week. If he's there, take him no matter what. But if not, I would go Travis Jones. I think he has a lot of potential, and a lot of people didn't see that because he played at UConn, and they don't play the Power 5 conferences and NFL caliber players. But he's an NFL caliber player that I think would be a great fit for the Browns at pick 44.
What are some of the things he would bring, you think? Some of the things that might be underrated about Travis Jones?
So something about Travis Jones, like his motor just keeps going. He's one of those players that just keeps grinding and keeps going. He might not always be the biggest guy on the line, but that doesn't deter him. He goes right at whoever is in front of him, and he's going to need that in the NFL because obviously there's going to be bigger offensive linemen than him. But like his motor just keeps going. He has a skill set that you want from a defensive lineman, something that we've seen from guys in the past that are no longer there. And the best thing about him is he'd be a rookie. He'd be on a cheap contract, and then he has time to develop. And then especially if you get a Clowney back and you have Myles Garrett, that would really start to shape up. And I don't think he would necessarily need to be a day 1 starter, but he has the potential to work in training camp to be a day 1 starter for this team.
Eddie McDonald, Dog Pound Daily. As always, great stuff, Eddie. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
All right, Eddie McDonald, make sure you read him, Dog Pound Daily. We're in this episode, take a quick time out. We shift our attention to baseball and the Cleveland Guardians, a big signing. Anthony Castrovince from MLB.com talks about the Jose Ramirez contract. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just a mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students, kindergarten through 12th grade, can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. We turn our attention to baseball. The Guardians will open up the season tomorrow in Kansas City, and some big news coming from the Guardians today. They signed Jose Ramirez to a 5-year, $124 million contract extension, full no-trade clause. They picked up this year and the final year of the 2023 option. So Ramirez is guaranteed $150 million moving forward. It is the largest contract in Guardians history, well surpassing what was Edwin Encarnacion's 3-year, $60 million deal back in 2016. Let's welcome in Anthony Castrovince from MLB.com. Anthony, were you surprised? And I mean, it is the Guardians spending money, which is a good thing.
It's a good thing, a very good thing, and a very good player. Slightly surprised just in light of how things had looked over the last several days. In the grand scope of the spring, not surprised because it's something they went in intent to work on, and he was intent to work on it, and his agent, of course. But last week, things seemed to kind of hit a standstill where it didn't look like this deal would necessarily come to pass. But they had the opening day deadline to get a deal done. And obviously there are a lot of trade rumors brewing, not just this spring, but, looking ahead to this summer. If they weren't able to get an extension done, he would have been a prime trade candidate. But obviously now he's got the long-term deal, the no trade clause, and it's more a matter of building around Jose Ramirez as opposed to trading him away for pieces and parts.
Now, the question is, when you look at the Guardians lineup, and you've kind of ranked all of the line, what do you see when you look at that line, strictly from the offensive side, the offensive lineup?
Yeah, I mean, this is what's kind of frustrating about the Jose Ramirez deal is there's a big question about they haven't done really anything this offseason. I was going to say, have they done enough to build around him? But they really haven't done anything to build around him this offseason. It's been a very quiet winter for them and a very busy winter in Major League Baseball and with an expanded postseason field. You asked me, obviously they were not in my top 10 lineups, that's for sure. They're certainly, more towards the bottom 10. It's hard to know how to project a lineup like this because really, you look at Ramirez, Ahmed Rosario, Franmil Reyes, and Miles Straw are probably the only 4 guys that you can pencil in, feel comfortable penciling in for 500 plate appearances. The rest is a hodgepodge of young and or unproven talent that, will be in more platoon type situations, mixing and matching, seeing if you can ride a hot hand, seeing who really develops the major league level. And that could go really any number of ways. There's a lot of talent in this system and that talent could, come to bear here in 2022, but you just don't know. So that's why you'd like more bankable guys that you pencil in as even if it's not, every single day, most days in the lineup, this is your right fielder, this is your left fielder. You'd feel better about this lineup and projecting this lineup if you had that. Right now, they just don't. It's a very experimental kind of situation.
And Terry Francona has done well hodgepodging and playing platoons and doing those things. So we'll give him the benefit of the doubt. But when you look at it, those first 4 are awfully good. If you could give me a 6 and a 7 guy and push guys down a little bit, I'd feel a whole lot better with a couple of bats in the middle of that lineup. Is that fair?
Yeah, it's absolutely fair. And that's why I do think there's some fair criticism to be levied here because they went into the winter, with money to spend and with a lot of trade capital, really. I mean, they've got kind of a glut of middle infield types in their system that have value, as trade pieces. So, it didn't have to be a major splurge like a Nick Castellanos or, Kyle Schwarber, somebody like that. Hey, Austin Meadows, Luke Voigt, these were trade pieces that were, dealt elsewhere for pretty reasonable returns and would have improved this lineup. I think, it added some stability to this lineup. So that's why, I understand they had their list of guys that they were willing to target this offseason, and it was a short list. And if they didn't get those guys, they were, their mode is more to give young players a chance, which I do understand, in certain spots and with certain guys. It'll be very interesting to see, how long the leash is for like a Bradley Zimmer, Oscar Mercado, guys who have had some exposure at the big league level and haven't really panned out quite yet. How long of a rope will those guys get before they turn to some other guys in their system and give them the at-bat? So it'll be very interesting, particularly in the first half, to see how Francona and the front office, for that matter, dole out those opportunities.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with you. And the interesting thing is their hitters really aren't at the AAA level. They're probably a year away. The guys in their system that you view as really good hitters probably aren't quite where they'd like them to be developmentally. So it's almost a mismatch as far as that goes. When you look at this pitching staff, what do you see? The starting rotation, and then you have Clase, closer. I liked him last year. I like him even more this year.
Yeah, and he's around for a while too, obviously. And they have contract stability, cost certainty with him moving forward, which is great. He was one of the most electric relievers in all of MLB last year. The bullpen, beyond him is very much young and unproven. So they brought back Brian Shaw as kind of a setup option, but largely unproven in that group. As far as the starting group goes, that could be a top 10 rotation in MLB again. They have the talent to do that. It's just a question of, obviously, Shane Bieber's health is first and foremost. A shoulder injury can be a tricky situation for a pitcher. And, sometimes the best predictor of future injury is past injury. So that's something you got to watch closely. But, he's looked good in camp, and that's great to see. And if he can get back to that level he was at, in the pandemic shortened year, then obviously you feel great about the front end of the rotation. I think the other question is just Cal Quantrill had an incredible second half. And, is that real? I'm inclined to believe it is, but we have to see that for sure. Tristan McKenzie made great adjustments last year after a rough start to the season. He really pitched with more conviction as the year went along and really finished the season on a strong note. So you feel good about that. And Aaron Savali, I think, is pretty underrated across MLB. He had the injuries last year with the finger, but I think he could be a very solid, consistent starter in the middle of a rotation. So it could be a very good rotation, but so much revolves around Bieber and his health.
Yeah, the other thing that just seems to be, I think it's going to be a very good rotation. I don't necessarily think it's going to be a dominant one where, they're going to shut everybody out. They're going to, it's going to be guys that give you consistently good starts. The offense is going to need to generate some runs, though.
Yeah, definitely. And, it can be frustrating trying to get all that to work on the same level when you have so much youth just in general and so much uncertainty there. I would say the biggest test as I look at the complexion of this roster is just we are coming off of a shortened, accelerated spring training, and it's going to test every team in baseball, the Guardians included. There's going to be a lot of injuries. There were a lot of injuries last year coming off the pandemic shortened season, and I would expect something similar this year. And you're going to have to rely on depth in your system. We saw that last year with the Guardians really having to go to guys that they never expected or were not even talked about before the start of the year. And that could be very well the case again here in 2022.
All right, before I let you go, we mentioned the Guardians didn't do a lot in the offseason. The Ramirez signing is a good one, obviously. How much has the American League Central Division improved?
Yeah, substantially. And that's, a challenge for them as well. I mean, Detroit has its best prospects graduating to the big leagues at this point. Spencer Torkelson is in the opening day lineup. Riley Green is another really highly regarded prospect who unfortunately fractured his foot in spring training. So he'll be out a while, but otherwise would have been in the opening day lineup. And they made a lot of, they were very active this winter and aggressive in trying to shore up that lineup with Javier Baez and shore up the rotation with Eduardo Rodriguez and Michael Pineda. So that was a team that was kind of underrated last year in terms of, if you look from May 1st forward, they were a winning ball club. So they'll be better. The Royals are a competitive team, a lot of power, a lot of speed. I don't think they're going to contend for the division title anytime soon, but there's a lot of talent there with Bobby Witt Jr. Could be a force of nature as a rookie this season based on the pedigree there and what scouts say about him. And then the Twins, of course, had a terrible, just fell off the face of the earth last year, but another team that was very active this offseason and landing Carlos Correa, which nobody thought was possible. So the White Sox, are clearly the favorite. They might be the biggest favorite of any, returning division champ from last year, but I think the division could be a lot more competitive than maybe people are giving it credit for.
Anthony Castrovince, as always, appreciate the time and the insight. The good news, Anthony, baseball is here and it starts to count for real for tomorrow, so we can forget about the lockout and watch some baseball. Appreciate the time. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Dave.
All right, Anthony Castrovince, make sure you read him. MLB.com, a national writer. That's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We'll see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Scheduled guest Quincy Carrier. We'll talk Browns with Quincy. Sam Amico from hoopswire.com. We'll talk about the Cavs now in the play-in tournament tomorrow, 4 o'clock on Sports for CLE. Have a great night, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow.